Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. Today is Friday, April 24th, 2026. Fighting between Israel and Hezbollah continued on Friday, despite U.S. President Donald Trump announcing a 3-week extension of the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire the day prior. Hezbollah said it struck Israeli soldiers in southern Lebanon's Qantara, while the Israeli military said it hit Hezbollah fighters in Bint Jbeil, close to the border, among other incidents. Trump's Thursday announcement was made shortly after he hosted officials from both countries at the White House for a second round of talks. Now, on the Iran talks front, the White House said on Friday that envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are en route to Pakistan. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that the two would have discussions with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi on Saturday. However, Araghchi said in a post on X earlier Friday that his visit to Pakistan would focus on, quote, bilateral matters and regional developments, adding that he would also visit Oman and Russia. Oman, and to a lesser extent Russia, have also been involved in efforts to achieve a deal between Russia and Iran. There's a lot of diplomacy going on, so I decided to speak to Al Monitor's diplomatic correspondent, Elizabeth Hagedorn. Elizabeth takes us through the challenges facing an Israel-Lebanon normalization deal, why Trump is pushing so hard for that, and where the U.S.-Iran talks really stand. Hope you enjoy. Elizabeth, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to catch up with you on all this. Obviously, there's been a lot of moving parts. It's good to get your thoughts on the diplomatic front. So, jumping into these Israel-Lebanon talks, the latest of which happened on Thursday, what do you think are the possible outcomes there? Is a broader normalization type deal on the table, or is this more a matter of achieving something like a longer ceasefire type agreement?
Well, what we have now is a 3-week extension of the ceasefire agreement, or as one source put it to me, a less fire agreement. And that's because both Hezbollah and Israel continued firing on each other during the truce, though at a much lower intensity. Certainly, the Trump administration hopes to achieve a more permanent peace between Israel and Lebanon. But it is hard to envision an Israeli withdrawal from South Lebanon and the return of Lebanon's displaced populations to those areas as long as Israel is still threatened by Hezbollah, which of course is not part of these talks, has rejected them, and has resisted disarmament efforts. And that has put the Lebanese government in a difficult position, caught between U.S. pressure to confiscate Hezbollah's weapons and domestic backlash to the fact that it's holding negotiations with Israel while under fire. And because this is Lebanon, the prospect of another civil war remains a constant concern in Beirut. And in Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu also faces his own political constraints. With elections later this year, he's under pressure to finish this war decisively, as was not the case in Gaza. So, to your question, I think we are more likely to see come from these talks is a significant de-escalation and perhaps some steps towards normalization between Israel and Lebanon, possibly the delineation of their land border, resolving disputes over shared water resources, travel for religious pilgrims, that sort of things, step towards a more normal relationship, but not that permanent peace deal that all sides are hoping for.
That makes sense. And you mentioned this U.S. pressure on both parties. Why is the administration pushing so much for an Israel-Lebanon deal?
Well, interestingly, President Trump joined yesterday's ambassador level talks. These talks were originally scheduled to again take place at the State Department. That's where the first round was held, where Rubio moderated between the two sides. But yesterday they were moved to the White House so that Trump could join. And to me, that suggests that Trump has taken a personal interest in this file. He wants to add it to the list of wars he's quote unquote solved. And what he really wants is that White House lawn photo op with Israel and Lebanon's leaders. He said yesterday that he invited them both to the White House and he expects them to come in the coming weeks. There is no meeting scheduled, and I'm skeptical that we'll see such travel on that timeline. But to your question, I think also important to remember that were the administration to achieve a significant de-escalation on the Israel-Lebanon border, if not a broader deal between those two countries, that would, of course, have positive implications for the US's parallel war with Iran, at the very least by creating some breathing room to negotiate.
On that note, we'll be back with more on the US-Iran talks after this short break.
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al-Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al-Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's AL-MONITOR.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25 for a discount.
Okay, we're back. Yeah, Elizabeth, that is a good transition to what I wanted to ask you about, which is the US-Iran conflict, debatably more complicated or less clear at the moment. I mean, what is your sense of how the administration views negotiations versus a return to war? Which do you think they prefer at present?
I don't get the sense there is much appetite from Trump at all to return to full-scale war with Iran, despite his bombastic threats. You just look at the fact that JD Vance planned to travel to Islamabad for a second round of talks with Iran, that the Iranians ultimately did not attend. Not only did Trump extend the ceasefire, despite insisting he wouldn't, but he's put no pressure, no hard deadline on Iran to submit a counter proposal to U.S. demands. And just yesterday, he told reporters he's in no rush to conclude a deal. Right now, the administration is playing a different game. They are attempting to squeeze Iran economically instead of bombing it. They are seizing ships loaded with Iranian oil, rolling out fresh sanctions, and blockading ports, all under this new push they're calling economic fury, following up on those earlier airstrikes they dubbed Epic Fury. And just today, the Treasury Department announced it was sanctioning a China-based so-called teapot refinery that it said had purchased billions of dollars worth of Iranian oil. I expect we will continue to see sanctions like that in the coming weeks.
And relatedly, what do you think the administration is primarily seeking at this point? Has this shifted to mostly being about Hormuz and restoring some economic normalcy? Or do they still think or hold out hopes for a wider nuclear deal? And how feasible is that?
I mean, the priority is definitely to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and end Iranian control over the waterway that previously moved 1/5 of the world's oil. But the administration is still seeking that wider arrangement that they were before the war that would tackle Iran's nuclear program, its missile production, and support for regional proxies. The problem is, despite the heavy U.S. military campaign on Iran, there's been little indication from its leaders that that has led to any increased flexibility on those issues. And not only that, but the technical challenges alone will take significant time to resolve between the two parties were they to get on more of the same page. Consider that the 2015 nuclear deal took the Obama administration almost 2 years to negotiate. That deal was around 160 pages long, and it covered just one issue, Iran's nuclear program. There are a host of issues that the Trump administration wants addressed, the nuclear program being just one of them. And for that reason, I am skeptical that we will see a deal that goes beyond ending the war and reopening the Strait of Hormuz in the near term.
Elizabeth, thanks a lot for your time, and we look forward to more of your insights and reporting on all these issues.
Thanks, Adam.
I want to conclude by addressing an important factor relevant to the negotiations, which is that of the Iranian leadership structure and signs of potential division within that. You may recall last week that Araghchi announced the Strait of Hormuz had reopened, only to be contradicted by media affiliated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. Al-Monitor's correspondent in Tehran addressed this in a Tuesday article, writing that hardliners and security officials are growing frustrated with Araghchi, Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, and other members of the negotiating team, describing diplomats and civilian leaders as part of a more pragmatic camp within the Iranian establishment. He wrote, quote, "Ultra-conservative figures, particularly within the anti-Western Paydari faction in parliament, have stepped up criticism of the negotiating team, accusing it of risking Iran's gains, especially its leverage over the Strait of Hormuz." He went on to mention, quote, "a broader hardline view that negotiations are inherently unreliable and that military deterrence offers the only viable path forward." Interesting days ahead. Thank you for listening to the Al-Monitor Brief. Be sure to follow Al-Monitor for more on the stories impacting the Middle East. Until next time, I'm Adam Lucente.